Yeah, I only went once. I went back after I moved one day to just hang out with a friend and whatever, but I miss it.
We got
Vinay,
4
you're
viewers.
back, aren't you?
What's up? Yeah, I'm in Boulder.
Well, welcome to the BuffStampede Basketball Podcast. Vinay, I got to record this too today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm pressing record on this computer, right? Not the cloud, the computer. Yep. Okay. So will you do it too, just so I don't screw up?
Yeah, I'm recording.
All right. Cool. All right. Welcome into the BuffStampede Basketball Podcast, coming to you after the Colorado Buffaloes just lost the Tennessee Volunteers 56-47. They were the 12th ranked Tennessee Volunteers in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a fun game to watch. Not. The Buffs and Vols played some ugly Tad ball. I wanted a hat. Sorry.
You ever seen somebody do an intro while walking into the closet?
This is the most on-brand thing for me, by the way, for the viewers on Facebook Live on the Buff Stampede. I just walk away while talking. I think I was cooking during one of the podcasts that we didn't post the video for. Anyway, to talk you through this podcast, he's Chase Howell. We've got Vinay Simlot as well.
Hello.
We're mainly recapping this Buffs Tennessee game, but we're talking about kind of some of the stuff that went into it, COVID regulations, all that good stuff. Not really good stuff. Boys, what was your first thoughts coming after this game and just watching this game as the Buffs put up a pretty good fight despite not really having their best, having it at all tonight?
It was, I'm not sure what the right word is to describe it. I used
a moral victory.
Yeah, maybe, but it didn't feel like a victory either. It was just more like, okay, well, that game happened. They'll be able to take some things from that game, but I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel bad about it either. It was just kind of it kind of went as expected. Maybe not that start was very expected, but other than that, that's kind of just how I expected that game to go.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think Chase or Jake, you said this to us in our group text during the game, but you learn a lot from playing Tennessee. You learn where your holes are. You've got a tough opponent. You're not going to learn anything playing against Mines. And so I'm really glad that they got a good team on the roster, especially now that Washington State got canceled. And then the other point I wanted to make is this is the first
Washington State? Don't you mean Arizona? Was that the joke?
Both. Because Washington State got canceled too.
Yeah,
whatever.
But that was the joke, right? Okay, it was a good joke. I was just making sure you did that on purpose.
But this is the first time we've seen Bartholomew back on the court after that first game. It's the first time we've seen Deshaun Schwartz on the court all season. So it's nice to see all these guys, see where you can get some contributions. Didn't think either of them played that well, but either way, I mean, it was good to get them all back on the court and playing together in real competition.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Chase. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna piggyback on his point about the players, but if that's where we're gonna take this, Deshaun had a very interesting debut, and I think we should probably spend some significant time on this because I thought he looked fine. Like he had the confidence. If you look at the plus minus, he was one of the better plus minus players on the team. So they played better when he was on the floor.
He did not score.
He didn't hit a single shot. So I don't know what to feel about that Deshaun Schwartz.
So for me, if you look at the Buffs today, we always talked about this last year, Chase, when we were covering them for Buff Stampede. It was always a problem with Deshaun Schwartz. Can he get to 10 points? That was the X factor. When he scored double-digit points, the Buffs won. If he had done that tonight, the Buffs would have won. Now, the Buffs need more reliability out of Deshaun this year. He's probably their second best player, or maybe second and a half best player.
Or at least he should be.
For him coming off of and a tough situation for him coming off of COVID. Understandable that he didn't look amazing tonight, but for me, the fact that Keyshawn Bartholomew was kind of an up and down mess didn't really surprise me because he's on the road, first real college basketball game on the road in Tennessee against number 12. With fans, that K-State game, I guess it was on the road, but it was a neutral site game, but it was in Manhattan. And then, you had Maddox Daniels, who also didn't do much. He was very quiet. So you had three players that are wing scorers for the Buffs that you need to hit threes with Eli Parquet out of the lineup and not playing. And they weren't able to space the floor. They weren't able to consistently and reliably handle the ball. And it really made things tough on McKinley Wright, because not only was there not a secondary scoring option, but Tennessee's defense of just stopping McKinley worked, because the Buffs didn't have any sort of spacing whatsoever because they couldn't shoot tonight.
Well, I want to disagree with you on one point. I think Jariah Horn established himself as the secondary scoring option today. He had 15 points. He was 4 for 8 shooting, 3 for 6 from beyond the arc. I think he had a good game. I think he might have had the best game out of anyone on the roster. I know the plus minus doesn't say that. He's a -1. The plus minus says Jamari Walker was the best player on the court right now with 7 points, I think, today. And then Tristan Da Silva was a +1. So those were the only 2 positive players. And then Dominique Clifford was a +2. But still, I think Jariah Horn had the best game offensively, especially.
Horn looked good. Horn looked good.
He did.
Horn was the best player on either team tonight. He made a couple mistakes in there that were kind of painful, but that's going to happen with a transfer, whether it's grad transfer or not. To me, the issue is, again, Horn hit 3 threes. The Buffs got 2 other threes from their entire team combined. They went 2 for 18 on shots from 3 that weren't Jariah Horn. That's not spacing the floor. And we talked about this kind of on our preseason podcast. McKinley Wright is a guy that needs to get downhill into the lane. Any type of outside shooting he gets from himself is a plus, because he's a downhill slashing type point guard. And he doesn't have the ability to get downhill into the lane when there are no guys to hit threes. And couple that with the ability of the Buffs to have 2 big men on the floor, which is huge for them because they're an undersized team this year with Dallas Walton and Evan Batty. Both of those guys aren't going to space the floor necessarily. And Tennessee had 2 senior forwards. So you just have kind of a problem of a really muddled lane. And it was all the things kind of recipe for disaster for McKinley Wright to have a bad game. And guess what? McKinley Wright had a bad game. But also, if McKinley Wright pulls it together for just 5 minutes in that game, the Buffs win and pull an upset number 12 in the country.
Yeah,
in
very
Tennessee.
good point on that. Yeah, I still had hope towards the end of that game that maybe, okay, McKinley gets going and they're going to get right into this game. They might even be able to take the lead. I'm a little bit over starting Batty and Walton. Like, I don't understand why they want to do that. Like you just mentioned, it clogs the middle. Neither of those guys can space the floor for you. And I don't think it's helping McKinley Wright out at all when those 2 are out there on the floor together. And neither of them have been good enough to really be starting right now.
I agree with you. I think you should start Jariah Horn in place of one of those 2.
I think Jariah proved tonight that he should be a starter on this team. And whether
and to me, the only problem with Jariah, and this was the same problem with Dallas and Evan tonight, is if you look at Colorado's bigs, they had 10 turnovers combined, which you just can't have out of 3 players that aren't even handling the basketball. Like that's pretty brutal to me. And all of them are upperclassmen. But again, you're going into a tough gym. You're playing a really tough team, a really talented team with veterans on it as well. You can kind of explain away some of this, but Chase, you kind of make this point, and I see someone on Facebook right now talking about how this kind of reminds them of last year.
It's Shane. Shane's always been hanging out with us on the football post games.
Hey, Shane, our guy.
I wrote this in the BuffStampede recap tonight. To me, one of the most important takeaways was the Buffs couldn't hit a shot to save their lives tonight, but they put their heads down and they kept playing defense. When they did that last year, the whole game would derail. It was a 5-point game until it turned into a free throw shooting contest late. This was a game, and the Buffs couldn't hit a shot. And again, that did not translate into the way they played defense. Like, the Buffs fought their way through this game. And I don't want to call it a moral victory because I really don't think it's a moral victory. I think there are a lot of positives, but I'm ultimately pretty disappointed with the fact that they couldn't eke out this game despite playing Tad ball and doing a lot of the things that the Buffs do well.
I think Tennessee out Tad-balled Tad and Colorado. I mean, from the get-go, they were the best defensive team I think I've seen all season, and I think Colorado might see all season. I think they were active on the boards besides that one possession where Colorado got the 4 offensive rebounds. Tennessee played Tad ball better than Colorado did today, is my hot take.
No, yeah, I think they got a defensive lesson, and Tennessee has a lot of players that are like NBA caliber defenders, and that's a big reason why they were able to slow
Is
down
NBA
McKinley.
caliber defender a compliment?
NBA, well, you know what I mean, not a.
Yeah, I know. I know what you
can shut down NBA guys. Yeah, I think it's kind of maybe what I was trying to say there. But you mentioned rebounding, and I'm surprised that CU out rebounded Tennessee. It didn't feel like that, and it must have just been because of Jariah Horn. McKinley Wright ends up being second on the team in rebounding with 7 rebounds as well. Walton and Batty combined for 5. You're just not going to win many games if that happens.
I honestly couldn't tell you what Evan Batty and Dallas Walton were doing on the floor tonight. They weren't beneficial. Like, and I love both those guys. Like, they're great dudes, but they just both had a bad night. And to me, I'm starting to Dallas has had moments, but I'm starting to worry about Evan Batty after 3 games because he's had 3 poor games. And I mentioned this on the last podcast, and you guys talked me off this ledge of this take. If Evan might struggle with no fans and creating his own energy and stuff like that. There were fans tonight and Evan still struggled. And that gym was that felt like an atmosphere, even on TV, you could tell a little bit. So I don't know if that's necessarily the problem, but it feels like something's kind of off with Evan. And I'm not sure if it's the system he's playing in and the players he's playing around, or if it's something else. And I don't know if you guys are seeing it too.
Yeah, he's just not doing anything for them right now. Rebounding, not playing very well defense, at least to start that game. He picked it up as that game went on. There's just nothing that you can hang your hat on right now with Evan Batty that makes him look like a reliable player in these first 3 games. Offensively, he gets the ball on the block, and it just doesn't seem like he knows exactly what he wants to do with it. There was one play where he scored. I was checking to see if it was his only bucket of the night, and he was aggressive. He made a nice aggressive turn out of the post, went right to the hoop. And that was the Evan Batty we got kind of used to last year, and we just haven't seen much of that at all. I'm definitely starting to get worried.
I don't want to see 3-point shooting Evan Batty. I know he's been working on it. I think it's nice if you bring it out once or twice a season, but 2 times a game, I think it's too much for him to be shooting threes. And I think it's your point, Jake, where I think the lane is just getting too clogged up, not enough movement on offense. Because last year it was Tyler Bay and Evan Batty. Tyler Bay was very good at getting to the right spots. Evan Batty could pass it to him. He was good at cutting. He was good at moving in and out of the lane. He was basically moving from the elbows in, and Evan Batty would be down on the block. This year, it's Dallas Walton who's down there with him. And that's why I think Jariah Horn and Evan Batty could be a better combination, just because Evan's better at that facilitating. He's better at passing the ball, and that's what gets him into these games, I think, psychologically too. And I don't think he's had enough of that this season.
Chase, you made this point. The Buffs did surrender 11 offensive rebounds, and I think that's why it didn't feel like the Buffs out-rebounded Tennessee. But the real problem, and I kind of breeze past this, is 23 turnovers. Like, it's just you can't go on the road, let alone to number 12 in the country, and win when there are 23 turnovers. And I want to be mad about McKinley Wright having 23 or 5 turnovers and only 4 assists, but I honestly couldn't tell you where the passing lanes would have been for him tonight, because he again, we keep talking about this lane being shut down. Everything McKinley Wright does on a basketball court is predicated on the things his teammates need to do, and his teammates couldn't do that tonight. And I think the trust, again, this didn't happen on defense, which I'm really stoked about for this team, because it's a really positive sign. But the fact that trust dissolved so quickly on offense and guys just started trying to make hero plays, that was pretty disconcerting to watch. And just talking with Tad Boyle after the game and some of the things he had to say, he talked about this being atrocious offensive performance, how he's disappointed in himself and the team. The fact that he has such good players is kind of why they all want to take over the game, which is a good thing in a way, because they all have confidence and they all believe that they can impact a game. But in the same sense, they've got to come together on as a team And I think we saw tonight that on offense, at least, the Buffs are really far away from being what they need to be, which is kind of the exact opposite of what we talked about after the South Dakota game, where we were talking about how the offense is so far ahead of the defense. The defense looked great. The offense looked like a train wreck tonight, and it looked like guys haven't been passing and throwing with the ball to each other and doing all the teamwork stuff, because guess what? It's pretty hard to be around people and do teamwork stuff right now because we're in a pandemic.
And you've got a couple players on your team that tested positive, so you don't want to do these big team activities. And I think your point is a great one. I mean, I saw one play where Keyshawn Bartholomew had the ball and Tristan Da Silva was open, and he didn't pass it to Da Silva because you saw what Da Silva did on the previous play, which was turn it over. So you're seeing that guys don't trust each other. And I don't think he had, I think he had a reason not to trust Tristan Da Silva. I mean, the guy looked lost out there.
Yeah, he got a lot of minutes in that first game against South Dakota. I'm not quite sure what Tad has seen him as a good reason to be giving him a lot of minutes.
He got the minutes that Jabari Walker should have had in that second half.
He ends up playing a little under 10 minutes tonight, which is just way too low for how good he's been in those first two games. I'm not sure the exact reason. My assumption is that Tad didn't think that he could match up well with their big men, just because they're a lot bigger and stronger than Jabari is. That could be the only explanation for me, but that shouldn't matter really in a 2-3 zone because Jabari would be out on the wing.
You know, one of the things I took away from this and looked at with you guys talking about the rotation stuff is the Buffs clearly don't have the rotations and their sub patterns and their lineups down yet. And it's been impossible for Tad, as we talked about with some of his COVID issues, but Jabari Walker needs to be part of that lineup. And to me, it became clear that Jabari Walker was eating a lot of the Deshaun Schwartz minutes tonight because Deshaun came back. But the Buffs need to find a way to get Jabari Walker into the lineup and on the floor at the same time as Deshaun Schwartz. And again, I don't want to criticize Deshaun Schwartz off tonight, but Deshaun Schwartz does need to be better. He's a senior, and it's going to take him maybe a game or two to get into rhythm. But and I know he talked about being more aggressive this offseason. At least he took 5 shots when it wasn't his night. Like, that's kind of a weird positive, but like, it's true because sometimes he'd disappear. He didn't really disappear when he was on the floor. He was still trying to be aggressive at times. It just didn't go his way.
And that's kind of the difference for me in just judging Schwartz's performances is when he is really bad, it feels like he wasn't even on the floor. And tonight you could tell when he was on the floor, he was trying to make something happen offensively. And they played a lot better offensively when he was on the floor. When he came in that first half, that's a big reason why they were able to go on that run and get back into the game. So he was still doing good things, but obviously he needs to score the basketball. That's what his bread and butter is.
And the one thing about Deshaun Schwartz is that he's coming off of COVID. I mean, he said he had mild symptoms. Have you ever tried to play basketball or exert at all after having a cold or the flu? I mean, it's not easy. So I expect his time goes down. Yeah, well, he's Michael Jordan.
I saw some refs have their flu game tonight, Vinay.
Whoa. Let's not go there.
I was actually surprised Tad didn't even say anything about the refs. I mean, I thought
they
it was
weren't
pretty
bad. I mean, I don't know why everyone was freaking out. They were fine. You expect 2 to 3 missed calls a game. They made 2 to 3 missed calls. It's fine.
Maybe a few more than 2 to 3, but I thought it was both sides. I thought they were bad both ways. So I didn't mind it.
I think they nailed all of their block charge calls. I think they were on top of that. I think they, there were a couple of out of bounds calls. There was obviously that call where the Tennessee guy had his eye bleeding, where the referee thought that CU had fouled him, and they went to review and they realized that his own player fouled him. But I think other than
that's gotta suck as a ref, by the way.
Oh my God.
And I know you messed up, and Vinay's an official. I've been an umpire for years and years. Like, there's nothing worse than getting it wrong. So going to the replay and watching it be wrong time and time again, and knowing there's literally nothing procedurally you can do to correct it, it's gotta suck. And like, we're instructed to not do makeup calls, and like, they kind of happen sometimes, but like, you really don't want to do makeup calls. So it's just like, man, like, I blew it. Like, at least I can admit it. Like, there's nothing you can do, and it sucks. Like, I feel feel bad for the guys. But like, meanwhile, the SEC network is out here talking about how the masks are preventing good calls for the rest. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Well, the other thing, the guy was like, oh, they looks like he got hit hard by a Colorado. Good for them going to look over it. And then they go and look at it, and the announcers do not say a word when they see the replay. Not a word. I mean, those guys really, really bugged me. They were obviously calling the game on Tennessee. They're both from Tennessee, I guess. I don't know. Whatever.
Definitely,
I'm not going to criticize announcers. Yeah. I just did, but I won't anymore.
And the other part about that color guy is he was very opinionated about the officiating, and it seemed like every call that went against Tennessee was a bad call.
He was like, oh, that is not a charge. I don't know in what world, blah, blah. That is not a foul. That's the one it was, where he said he was still moving his feet. Here's a public service announcement for everyone watching or listening. You can move your feet and take a charge as long as you're legal. You only need to establish legal guarding position with 2 feet on the ground. After you establish it, you can move back, you can move laterally and take a charge. That's the rule. Just so everyone knows.
Okay, so any closing thoughts on this game? I'm not sitting here talking about it. I'm not. I hate doing the ref. Oh, you know what we forgot to mention because we went straight into the game? It was really cool the way this game got together. Chase and I guess Vinay, you two both.
It materialized,
It materialized really quick. And you talk about the relationship between Kim and Nate materializing over such a long period of time playing against each other in the Big 12. Nate for Colorado, obviously, and Kim for Mizzou. And then them maintaining their friendships as they both play different pro careers and then come back and they both work under Tad Boyle. Obviously, all three of us have had relationships with both of them. Two of my favorite people in all of sports, let alone basketball, like two great dudes. It's really cool the way this came about, where it literally seems like if I were texting Chase about both of us having intramural teams and we weren't on each other's schedules, and I'm just sitting there like, you won't take us on, you won't. And then both of our schedules clear up and it's like, all right, I guess we challenged each other. Like, it seems like that was a really cool thing. And just talking with Tad about his relationship with Rick Barnes, it really felt, it was a warm story about the underbelly of college basketball, which doesn't really happen.
Yeah. When was the last time you heard a warm story about the underbelly of college basketball?
Never.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited that this is not just a one-off thing. I'm excited that there's going to be 2 more games after this. And obviously Tennessee will have to come to Boulder next year. It'll be sold out.
And more importantly, Chase, Howell, and Jake Shapiro are going to go to Nashville.
There it is.
Let's go.
Are we going to go tear up Nashville and talk some smack to the Tennessee fans that litter that place? But probably the best nightlife outside of Vegas.
The Music City.
We almost didn't make it out of Vegas, Chase. I don't know if we should go to Nashville.
I think we should go to Nashville for sure.
I think you want me in Nashville for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like this is a really good matchup for Colorado. And you were already texting me this week, Chase. You're like, man, Buffs are gonna have KU and Tennessee on the schedule next year in Boulder. Amazing.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great home schedule. I know they usually have one marquee non-con game, but I don't remember 2 big time non-conference games at home in the same year.
Maybe the year didn't they play Auburn and Xavier the same year? And the Auburn game was the part of the 12-hour marathon, the 24-hour marathon. I want to say that happened the same year. It might have not.
Yeah, maybe in that would have been 2015-16 season.
I think that was 14-15.
14-15. But yeah, that's possible. But this will be, I mean, obviously Kansas is always a big deal. And now that there's this little thing with Tennessee, I think that'll make it even better.
So that's a really good job by Colorado staff. And it's going to be really tough non-conference game playing in Nashville in 2 years. But you look at what the Buffs have coming in, that class will be sophomores. The guys that are freshmen now will be juniors. The Buffs will be a pretty experienced team, and that's going to be a really important and big game for them. I also think it's going to be really cool for the freshman class next year and the sophomore class next year to have that game in Boulder, because that's probably going to be one of their first big games if it happens before Kansas and they get to feel that atmosphere. So it's really nice. And one of the things I like Tad saying before this game, just to lead up, is like, we get to a new part of the country and go kind of show who we are and what we're about. The Buffs just pulled a kid from DC. That was their top recruit. The Buffs touring the country, as stupid as it sounds, only being in a location for 2 hours of TV time, it still matters. Like, it matters to the kids that are going to, you know, if they're from DC, or if they're, you know, it's the same thing we talk about in football. It's the kids from Texas going to see you because they know A&M is going to be on their schedule once or twice while they're going here. You know, it's something that actually does have an impact, as little and minute as that may sound.
Yeah, I think we see it all the time in football, and I think it's important to play an SEC team too. They never. It feels like, I know you mentioned Auburn, but it feels like they rarely play an SEC team. And
that was the last time they played an SEC team in basketball. It was that Auburn game, and historically speaking, the real only SEC team the only SEC team they've played has been Missouri, who was not in the SEC.
Yeah, so it's always great to get into the South, and obviously I think that just brings more attention for recruiting and should help them. It seems like they want to recruit nationally. They want to get out there and spread that brand name.
Vinay, what were you doing?
I was just plugging my computer in. Yeah, just making sure it's charged. I agree. I think it's good to get all these guys seeing Colorado. I don't know how many people out west have the SEC Network Plus on their channel lineup, but I'm sure there are people in Tennessee who do.
Probably more than have Pac-12 network.
You know what? It was
I don't have either.
It was a lot easier for me to watch the SEC Network Plus than it was to watch the Pac-12 network, which really bugs me.
Me as well. I use the ESPN app all the time, so it really didn't change my whole thing.
So the one last thing I want to talk about too before we get out of here, well, there's two things. Is one, what's going on around the country with all these non-conference games, and we talked about in the last pod with just everyone wanting to schedule everyone this year, because there's really no harm in doing it, and putting college basketball on a good stage is such a good thing. I love that Tad, one, we talked about how much it was cool for him to get Mines, and Tad's respect for Colorado basketball and Mines. Wouldn't be surprised if the Buffs put another game on the schedule coming up in this next week, the way scheduling has been working, and even might be Mines. I have no idea. Tad said he's going to do everything in his power to get his team 27 games this year. So I'm not sure how many are on the schedule right now. I think they might be missing one, but I'm not exactly sure now. I have to do that math. Like I said, I just watched the Tennessee game. I'm all into that game right now. But they have Northern Colorado and Nebraska Omaha next week at home before they head to Vegas, where they're going to play Washington and Grand Canyon. That trip could potentially be extended the way things have been happening across college basketball. That's another opportunity to get those games in. But it's very weird to be sitting here on December 8th with the Buffs having not played a single home game yet.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it doesn't matter since we can't go to the games but it has to have something to do with these guys' confidence, because I think playing in your own gym and watching your shots go through the hoop that you always get to see every single day, I think that makes a pretty big difference when it comes to shooting, and just playing a game there, I think would have helped their confidence. At least putting up big points, putting up 100 points on School of Mines might have helped their confidence. They wouldn't learn anything, but it might help their confidence.
Yeah,
that was my point from the group chat. You're just stealing my points from the group chat about how I want to play kindergartners and kickball and just beat them because it makes me feel confident.
That's what I do on these podcasts. I just read your points.
Mm-hmm.
You're just reading.
I've noticed a lot of everybody's points have been coming out of different mouths during this.
Have I stolen a take? I stolen a take?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But
can I give you my hot take though? I think I said this before we got on this podcast. Eli Parquet was out. I don't think they would have won if he was playing anyway.
It's just so dumb. It might not even be worth addressing. But Chase, go ahead.
Well, I mean, they probably still lose that game, but Eli Parker helps this basketball team, especially when we talk about spreading the floor offensively and his ability to shoot the 3-point shot
and
how
looking at who ate those minutes up and how they played in those minutes and the poor decisions that they made in those minutes.
Yeah, you mentioned Tristan da Silva earlier. You know who probably wouldn't have played if Eli Parquet played?
Who? Tristan da Silva?
Well,
Neek Clifford probably wouldn't have played either, and Neek Clifford was pretty good for a few minutes.
He gave some positive minutes actually. Shout
out. Yeah. So
you know what? I would have been happy
from this game were Neek and Horn.
I would have been happy if Clifford had played and not Tristan da Silva, but we already talked about that. Eli is not like a prolific 3-point shooter. He's like a 32% free 3-point shooter, which is better than anyone the Buffs have right now, I guess, besides Tariah.
Exactly. They 20% from the team, and it was only Horn making multiple shots. So there you go, Vinay.
Okay. Well, I guess
I don't know.
Have you been watching any of these games across college basketball? I watched Kentucky and Kansas throw up enough bricks to build an entire development.
Yeah, 3-point shooting is just really, really bad right now. Is that because they just haven't been able to get into gyms? I mean, I guess they were open for the most part.
Gyms are closed around the country. I mean, Jalen Sherrod, I know she was working out at her gym in Birmingham, Alabama, but not many of our players live in Birmingham, Alabama, where gyms would be open.
All right, what was the final on the game then?
I think it's tied up 83 right now.
Did you get the Brian Howell?
Buffs take a 84-83 lead. Pioneers win 85-84.
Brian
3
at
seconds
the game
left. Yeah, Brian's there.
Sweet.
I think. I don't know how else he'd be watching. I might be on Pac-12 Network, I guess. I don't
think
Buffs.
I was trying to find that earlier.
Buffs might be getting a win on the women's basketball side. They're no longer undefeated. Oh, okay. Well, the Buffs are no longer undefeated in men's basketball. That is for certain. They are undefeated in football, and you can listen to these two, Chase Howell and Vinay Simlot, on the BuffStampede Football Podcast.
They just lost to DU.
Yeah, they lost to DU at home.
Oh my god!
No, it was at DU. I thought
it was at DU. Yeah,
it was at DU.
Okay. Yeah, it was a road.
I told you.
45.
What did I tell you, Chase?
Yeah. That Magnus Arena, man, tough place to play.
Rowdy crowd.
Yeah. Thanks for ruining my transition. I was going to say that you guys are on the BuffStampede Football Podcast that you can listen to Friday, but I'm not going to say any of that now.
No,
I'm mad that you guys ruined my transition.
Before and after the game.
So he's Chase Howell. He's Vinay Simlot. You can watch it on Facebook too. Thanks for listening to BuffStampede Basketball Podcast. You can get this wherever you listen to stuff, which is a lot of places now, so it's not even worth listing. And of course, subscribe to our board. Our Inside the Herd stuff is really good. Like, it does better coverage of CU sometimes than me. Like Chase's flight tracker, for instance. And thanks for tuning in. Maybe we'll do Facebook Live again. Who knows? And we will talk to you very, very soon.